Can I segue this Dr. K into something more interesting? What are you going on about? Lucas, listen, I'm a moron. So why don't you just simplify what the disagreement is right now? Put it into a nice
I don't
30
know. I haven't
second
watched his full
clip.
response yet, but it basically has to do with like I'm summarizing. And I haven't even watched it yet, but it sounds like what he's basically saying is that his contention is that some people, I guess young men is this focus here, some people's lives are actually so objectively bad that a reasonable mind could look at the circumstances of said life, project circumstances into the future, and go, this, I want out, and kill themselves. And his argument is that when you approach a person like this and you say, oh no, you're actually just brain broken, you're unhealthy, you're mentally unwell, you need SSRIs or therapy or blah, 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 what you're doing is you are, there's a word I'm looking for, you're devaluing or you're invalidating their lived experiences, and you're invalidating their perspective of life by basically saying like, oh no, sir, you don't have a good perspective on life, you're just crazy. Go to therapy instead for your craziness, not for your life issues, and that it makes those people feel unheard. I think it's like, that's like the Steelman version of the argument that he's presenting. And I think the position that I would come from is, I think that being compassionate and being accepting of people's life stuff is important, but I would say that I feel like you need to lean more in on the other side, where I feel like what people are lacking is resiliency. That the issue that you're running into is if you feel suicidal because you didn't get into a college you want, or you feel suicidal because you're 27 and you haven't had sex yet or whatever, that what's actually happening here isn't just a set of life circumstances, because given your life on paper, you shouldn't really want to kill yourself, but instead it's a framing of the world, it's a perspective of the world, it's the resiliency you have towards adverse events, and it's your ability to persevere in a world where everything isn't always working out as great as possible. And then the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle, where you have to counter on both of these ends, like acknowledge, like, yeah, I understand why this sucks, like this must feel horrible, especially when you see this, that, and that. He probably feels like I'm way too far on my side, and I probably feel like he's too far on his side. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I don't know. But okay, let me listen. I will say this too, and this is hard because this all gets lost in the online bullshit. Whatever Dr. K says about this stuff, like, I know that he's a hack because he believes in this Indian magic. No, I'm just kidding. Whatever Dr. K says, I know that the applied practice of whatever theory he gives is going to be better than the craziest straw man version of whatever somebody could think it is. So like, for instance, when Dr. K is saying this, I'm assuming, and I would give a high level of credibility to Dr. K because of who he is. I'm assuming that when Dr. K, if he gets a young man that comes into his office or practice and he starts talking to them, he's not just gonna be like, oh bro, 100%, like your life is horrible and I see why you could kill yourself and it's everybody else's fault around you, and it's just like, yeah, it's a really bad life. Like, I'm sure he's gonna be doing a combination of things to make this person more resilient, to understand and empathize with their life situations, to help them alleviate things in their life situation. Like, I'm sure he's gonna be doing a combination of things. He's not just gonna be like leaning to one side and being like a demagogue dipshit from fucking Twitter or whatever. 100%, yeah. It's not a coincidence that his explanation of what is going on with male suicide perfectly fits with his overall messaging about problems with the modern world and need for spiritualism. Well, of course it's not a coincidence, because they all probably stem from a similar area of belief, right? Of course. Like, it's no coincidence that Destiny cucks out for the messaging of the government and also tends to believe, like Big Pharma when they publish studies. Yeah, of course not. It stems from a relatively stable belief in like third-party validation and studies and shit. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it comes from a similar area. That's not, yeah. But that's not to discredit anything he's saying.
I would like to help.
Yeah, like if you listen to what Dr. K says and you're like, wow, Dr. K would just tell people to go kill themselves because they have a life that's not worth living. Like, that's, like, I think Noah's, and I don't even blame Noah's opinion because you might not know anything about who this guy is, but like, that's, obviously he's not going to say that. Well, maybe it's not obvious if you don't know anything about Dr. K, but you're going way too far there.
On balance, I do not think that the rates of mental illness, like undiagnosed mental illness, are super, super high. I tried to find statistics on it. The numbers are somewhere between 40 and 100%, which means that if we're diagnosing 20% of people with depression, what that means is that the real number is somewhere between 30 and 40%. It's not like we're not missing like, 9 out of 10 people. We're missing maybe 1 out of 2, and that's sort of a generous estimate. So even if we assume that we're missing 1 out of 2 and we double the rates of detection, right, we're still like talking about a large chunk of the population, somewhere between 20 and 40% of the population that doesn't have a mental illness that's committing suicide. And the other reason I believe that is because of studies like this.
Careful. Ooh, he's super right up to this point, but I think he's making a statistical error here. If it is the case, for instance, that we are just missing 1% of the population that has depression, and we're missing that 1% that's being diagnosed, that 1% would probably over encapsulate the entirety of the suicided population. Keep in mind that the entire population is not killing themselves. It's a very, very small fraction of the population. So if 1% of the population in the United States is 3.3 million people, well, if there are 60,000 suicides a year, what is it? How many suicides per year, USA? If there are 50,000 suicides overall, yeah. If there are 50,000 suicides in a year, you would only need to miss 0.5%, not even, I'm sorry. You would need to miss about 1/5% of the population, I believe. 330 million times 0.2. 330 million. Okay. hold on. 1% is 0.01. 0.01. One fifth of a percent is 0.002. Oh, wait, so it would be even less than this then. My numbers are correct. 1/5. It would be a very, 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 very small percentage of people. Sorry, Jesus. Anyway, yeah, if you're missing your depression diagnoses by even like 0.001% or something, you could still theoretically be missing the entire population of suicidal people. So I think his statistic thing here is a little bit off. But I will say that he is correct that if you're analyzing all the suicided people and you see there's a whole wave of people that don't have any diagnosed mental illness, it would be incorrect to say, oh, well, I think they are all mentally ill. It's just undiagnosed, because that's not what the evidence is suggesting. He is correct there. My point there where I say I think that there is something going on that's not diagnosed, that's just baseless conjecture by me. Or I wouldn't say baseless, but it's like this is an intuition or feeling I have. But that's not based in data. I would say that. Okay. To be clear, yeah.
I can show you all that if we look at this, like if we look at suicide, we can see that there are other precipitating factors that aren't mental illness, which is why people kill themselves. There's data around this, right? So it's not just. So I think here's kind of where I am with this. It is a valid.
Oh, I would also. I'm trying to think. I think that you could kill yourself. I think there can be like acute suicidality based on crazy life things. So, for instance, I could imagine a person who's mentally healthy. I could imagine people who are mentally healthy who have a really bad string of things who kill themselves. So for instance, like you're doing fine, or you might be mentally healthy, and then all of a sudden you lose your job, you flunk out of school, your child dies, and then your mom and dad just and you're like, and you kill yourself. I could imagine that in an acute, like within a week of this happening, or a few days of this happening, or a few hours, you kill yourself. I can imagine that happening. To me, it seems pretty obvious that you could rationally commit suicide. The big question is whether in the modern world, safe for truly acceptable, that's the issue that I have, is that like, I don't know if you, like, I feel like a healthy human brain has a high level of self-preservation. I think an ordinary human body, ordinary human brain, you have a very high level of self-preservation. And it should take a lot to break that down to the point where you're gonna kill yourself, right? So the idea that you're committing suicide over some bad events happening rather than a mental illness, that seems really extreme to me. That would be my feeling on that.
Do we say to this person comes in, and I have suicidal ideation? Do we assume that 1% of people are malfunction of the mind? Or do we say, okay, like we're going to not be paternalistic therapists. We're going to listen to you. We're going to acknowledge that you know your life better than we do. And if someone shows up and says, all lives have value, like, I think that's great. Like, I think it's great that you believe that. Now what I want you to do is, if you're someone who believes this, and what would it take for you? What would you have to go through to change this belief? What would your experience of life have to be? How bad would your life have to be to change your mind that every man has a life worth living? What kind of shit do you have to go through to throw you off of that?
I think, and that's why I'm saying for a healthy brain, conditions that persist that are never going to change, that's what persistent means. Conditions that persist indefinitely that you can't acclimate to. So my understanding, so for instance, like losing limbs, which I would imagine is a death, I would kill myself. I would imagine I'd kill myself. Apparently that doesn't happen.
Wait,
and I think,
really?
what?
How many limbs we talking?
No, not losing limbs, but like if I went like blind or deaf, I would imagine I'd feel suicidal.
Well then say
Yeah.
shit you fucking mean,
Because
bro.
for a lot of people, losing limbs is a big deal, okay? But
It's not
yeah,
for you.
for a
So
big,
if you lost all your limbs, you'd be fine.
no, I feel like I would feel suicidal, but apparently a lot of people get over it somehow.
If
okay?
you lost your dick, would you kill yourself?
No, but your mom might kill herself. So
Okay, all arms, all legs, and gone.
yes, but but my understanding is I don't think people ever adapt to chronic pain. I could be wrong. Well, let's look it up. Can people adapt to chronic pain? My understanding is that this always feels bad and horrible and is terrible. But maybe I'm wrong. Let's check. Eating well, getting plenty of sleep, engaging in improved physical activity are all positive ways to handle your stress and pain. Can you live a good life? While most articles focus on the negative aspects of pain, there are individuals such as Anne suffering from chronic... Anytime they got to point to one person? Oh, no. Suffering from chronic pain who can still manage to live a good life. Jesus. Pain resilience health resources. Don't lie. You have this hunch or feeling from watching House, didn't you? No. What? If anything, I have this hunch or feeling because I lived in a fucking retirement home from when I was 16, 17, and 18 when I lived with my grandma. South of 25th and Cape Art, Tregarian Senior Residences. If I have any old senior people living in Bellevue watching me near Offutt Air Force Base. But old people that suffer chronic pain, it just seems like it's an always horrible, evil, like, it feels like one of the worst things that you can have. Like, it's up there with like mental illness, like having chronic pain where you're just always hurting or sore. And I think that's why these people are prone to drug abuse. I'm sorry, hold on. Do you think that House invented people abusing pain medication for chronic pain? Do you think that's that's like saying like, man, I have a really big interest in like detective stuff, or I like to investigate stuff. Oh, really? Did you get that because House invented investigations, or what? You don't think that boxers or MMA fighters don't adapt to pain? No, what? Pain that you get by fighting is way easier to deal with and is way less severe than chronic pain. Anytime you have a source of something that can be abated, that you can move away from, that's way easier to deal with than a chronic, everlasting, horrible thing. Even for me, I prefer like anxiety or stressful events on some crazy shit where I can identify the source of it rather than like general anxiety or like a chronic feeling. This chronic stuff is just, it's another level of nightmare horrible. I don't know how to explain it. If you haven't felt it, then it's whatever. I mean, I haven't even had chronic pain before, but like just in watching people deal with it and the idea, the mental anguish, like dealing with conditions that are chronic versus just like, why am I even explaining this? Okay,